as Ricky said, I'm a joiner-upper in this space. So although I don't formally identify as a PRISM, I think I can see myself as one of these adjacent roles alongside this. So I have a background in international partnerships, mostly on the research side. And I fully identify with what Helen was saying earlier about being a stage manager. And I think that's a really important and often undervalued role that many of us play. And I'm really looking forward to exploring with the panel here today, what kind of things get in the way of doing our jobs, but also what can make it easier. And perhaps we could even move into thinking about who needs to be involved in making it easier. So if I could kick off first by asking our panelists to introduce themselves and just say a little bit about their role and how they identify with the term PRISM as well. So can I start with Claudia?
Yeah. So I'm Claudia. I'm a CDT manager from Nottingham, and I have been a CDT manager for a long time. I think the student contact and seeing the students developing over the 2 years I see them is really one of the highlights of my job. And yeah, that's
Hi everyone, I'm Saima. Delighted to be here at the PRISM conference, the second one. So it's lovely to meet familiar faces today. And I currently work as the main research project manager at the Christie NHS Foundation Trust, where I'm managing a flagship precision medicine clinical trial for rare cancers. And I'm also working at the University of Manchester, where I'm leading the design and development and delivery of a targeted comprehensive career development program for global majority researchers. And I'm also the founder of the South Asian Women in Higher Education Network, which is a grassroots community-led initiative that connects, supports, and celebrates women of South Asian heritage who are either working or studying across UK universities. Amongst other hats, I also recently took up the role of a co-chair of the University of Manchester's Research Project Managers Network.
Hello everyone, thank you for having me today. Hopefully, I'm share some expertise. I'm Rajman. I am the Yorkshire Consulting for Equity in Doctoral Education Project Manager, so nice short and snappy title, which is short for YSEED. So I am at the University of York, and I've worked in higher education for almost 20 years. And the project YT that I'm focusing on and working on at the moment is a race equity project focusing on supporting ethnically minoritized PGR to access PGR study, but also to support them on whilst they're on the course and experience and studying for their PhD, because we know that there's a high attrition dropout rates for ethnically minoritized students because of the extra and additional barriers that they face. So there's a number of work packages so that we'll kind of entry that fair access. So it's kind of further in the pipeline of kind of traditional WP widening participation work, supporting students to say on course, but we're also looking at selection and recruitment practices at PhD level. As I said, University of York led, but we also work with 4 other partners, the University of Sheffield, the University of Leeds, University of Bradford and Sheffield Hallam, as well as a number of CDTs and DDPs. So it's a huge project funded by research in the Office for Students, and a huge number of stakeholders and partners. I'm the project manager. Although I wouldn't necessarily say that's a big part of my role, I'd say that's probably a third of my role. A lot of my role is supporting PGR and also other ethnically minoritized staff that are in this work and leading this work that can be quite emotionally burdensome, quite draining, quite challenging, it's actually coming to an end of the project, and there have been a number of learnings that hopefully we can take forward and hopefully a lot of us can incorporate today in our own projects. I'm actually coming to the end of my 4-year project, but also my time at the University of York, and I'm actually considering consultancy now, so all the experience that I've got, taking that to support other projects as well. I've got a legal background and I work on a number of steering committees, the Anti-Racist Working Group, and on the Staff Race Equality Committee as well, and a number of others which I won't bore you with. But as I think a lot of the folks today that actually we absorb all of these additional responsibilities, take on all these extra roles. And yes, absolutely to say yes, but just mindful of burnout and well-being, and that's kind of my main focus of my consultancy going forward. So talk to anybody about that later on if you're interested.
Thank you. And Katie?
Yeah, so I'm Katie Welford. I'm also from the University of York. There are many of us dotted around. So I am a Centre for Doctoral Training Manager. We're funded by EPSRC. So my the doctoral training partnership I work with is Fusion Power, and running alongside our last CDT as well, which was plasma science and plasma physics and material science. You can tell I'm not a scientist. So we have two concurrently running CDTs at the minute. Our partnership is across 6 institutions, so we're dealing with a lot of academics. We've got over 100 students currently on our books across all of our institutions. We have a number of industry partners as well. So there's a lot of things going on there. And I think one of the things you said is, how do you identify as a PRISM or how it works? And for me, I came into my role from a teaching background. So I was actually a secondary school teacher before I joined the university, and I had to be told by an academic what PRISM was because I had no idea. So I didn't necessarily identify as a PRISM initially because I didn't know it was a thing. As soon as I was told the thing, it kind of made sense. I was like, yeah, we're supporting the research for all these students, we're supporting this training program, and I am the manager of that. So therein kind of fits within the PRISM. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. So I think we've already started to explore some of the barriers to getting things done as a PRISM and to career progression. But I think if I could come to the panelists here to ask what challenges they've faced and or overcome so far in their careers to date, that would give us some ideas of how you've navigated this complex landscape. So I think I have to Claudia first.
Okay, so I joined the university part-time as a CBT manager, and because as you hear, I'm not from here, and we had kids. My partner is an academic and earned more money, and it's I just didn't know how to handle it with having no other support in the same country, and it does something to you, I think, working part-time and sometimes working part-time for maybe too long. My job wasn't necessarily a part-time job, so I really struggled with getting work done, did a lot of extra hours, you never get back or paid. And it does something to your confidence, or at least it did something to my confidence. And I never said yes to anything because I was so struggling getting the work done because it was only part-time hours. And then I got this opportunity. The head of school said to me, "There's this secondment going. Just go for it." And that was so. I have good memories of COVID because I was part of the team that set up the testing service at the University of Nottingham, and we were big. And we were so supportive, and the leadership really made sure that every voice was heard. So I realized, I can really work with lots of people. People actually appreciated, my skills, and was like, yeah, I'm definitely ready for a full-time job now. And I went back full-time, and gives you an opportunity to say yes to a lot of things. Suddenly, you're on an ADI group, but then we have a lot of neurodivergent students. So I became a member and then the chair of the staff neurodiversity group. And then you suddenly have opportunities as well. Somebody said, there's an EDI fellowship 1 day a week, just apply. And it wasn't only for academics. So I was like, I apply. So I'm the only professional service person, and I'm by far the oldest member of the team. But it really doesn't matter. And through this, I've had opportunities as well. Somebody said, I wanted to put an EDI grant in. Do you want to be a co-I? And I said, yeah, sure. These grants didn't get through, but we've just recently got an EDI grant focusing on neurodivergence PGR students with the EDI Hub. So, now I can say yes, I have opportunities, and I didn't have them when I was part-time. And I think I didn't value myself when I was part-time, so other people didn't value me.
It's a really interesting insight. Yeah, as an extra layer of complexity in terms of putting boundaries around what you can do, and then having greater opportunity once you had a bit more breadth and bandwidth. Yeah, okay. Katie, please.
Yeah, so as I said, I came from a teaching background, so I came into the space with a very different kind of perspective of how things worked. I had the kind of key requisite skills to do the job, but it was a sort of kind of a bit of uncertainty coming into that space. So one of the things I would say though is when I was teaching, I did feel very, very undervalued. As a teacher, I was often told, you're very inexperienced. I would suggest ideas and they weren't listened to, and it was a very kind of negative kind of position to come from. I sort of promised myself when I moved into the university role that I would try to recognise my own value, like Claudia was saying, and that's quite a hard thing to say actually, because like Marie was saying earlier on about imposter syndrome that we often sit within. It's actually really, really hard to kind of actually sit there and go, oh, do you know what? No, I am good at this. And no, I do know what I'm talking about. And actually, no, I am the expert in the room. And part of that was me kind of trying to flip the perspective on myself and kind of actually almost tell myself those things to convince myself there. But also part of it is about who you've got around you, and there's an element of that which we can't control. We can't control who necessarily it is that we are always working with, and my sense of value grew and was able to be pushed forward because I worked with very, very good people. And I worked with, and I recognised completely, I was, maybe lucky, I don't know, to work with academics who really valued me and understood that I had those expertise. And, so for me, with my career progression, I've actually been through a role regrade in this role. And that's not to say it was an easy process. It wasn't, it was actually very challenging. And there were several barriers in place, but I was almost protected from that by the academics that I was working with by my PI, because for them, they saw my value and they thought it was really important that the organic progression that I had demonstrated through my role was recognised, and that then for the new bid, I was named as a co-I on that bid. And within that context, and the kind of value that I'd given, the strategic impact that I was demonstrated on the CDT, it was really important, an important part of that kind of re-bidding process. But there's a balance of me kind of having the confidence to demonstrate my value, but also having these people around us who are able to advocate for our position. And I think it's important to remember that sometimes we might feel like we're the ones doing something wrong. It's not always, it's not us necessarily that are doing something wrong. It might be the people are around you. So how do we kind of balance that aspect of advocating for yourself, but also finding the people around you who can advocate for you to help with those kind of points of progression of, how jumping the gap or getting through the gap.
Okay, I'd be interested to hear from other panelists what you think needs to happen to make that value that you feel from your academic colleagues, which we heard about earlier. Many of the previous panelists said they felt very valued by the academics that they work with, How do we move that to a systems level? How do we start to get that recognition at a higher level that then makes it easier to be recognised as equal partners in this relationship? And I was just reflecting as you were talking that maybe there is a self-consciousness around the idea of not being an expert because we are surrounded by people whose vocation and whose identity is very much as experts. And maybe we feel that contrast in some ways. Does anyone else want to come in on that?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point you said, because we ignore the fact that we need to advocate for ourselves. In our PRISM roles, I'm a research project manager, and for me, my life revolves around the PI or the researchers around, but then we forget that we are a critical part of it. We are enabling that, and we don't speak about that much. There needs to be a culture change, really, of advocating for ourselves. So basically, a self-agency. We will speak more about that later in the context, but that's something which can be done more. The other thing is the lack of representation. For me, in my journey, through the barriers that I have encountered, for me, very similar to Claudia. I'm a mom of 3, so I worked part-time for most of my life. I always chose roles which fit in with my family settings and my community. When I finished my PhD, it was a conscious choice for me not to go on to a research associate role because of the challenges that come with it, of not having to work that flexibly. So after that, I went into research project management, and it was completely new to me. One was that aspect of fitting in and feeling that imposter syndrome we have spoken so much about over here. But then during that journey, I realized that everybody faces imposter syndrome, whether you're the highest level or the lowest level, you still have that. So for me, one of the realizations along the way until now is that it doesn't matter. You have that voice telling you don't fit in, don't belong, and that's okay. Just do it. Advocate for yourself, speak for yourself. Don't be shy about it. I know with coming from it, being born and brought up in India and then coming over here, there's always a level of different cultural influence over here. When you talk about yourself, you don't want to sound like you are being pompous, or you want to kind of adjust around the surroundings, but then you also have to think that it's you, and you have to speak about your journey and your items. So that's one of the things, self-advocacy, and then brings about the next topic was the representation as well. So when we don't see the representation, especially from minority background, and that's exactly what I felt. I felt like I couldn't move on to the next role because I didn't see anybody like me in that role. And that's when the community and the peer support comes in place.
I'm just coming back to your thought, Katie, that self-advocacy goes so far, but you also need the system to invite you into those spaces as well. So who needs to be in the conversation to meet us halfway in terms of our advocacy for these roles, which have much of their value in breadth, where a lot of the scientific and the academic role is very much in depth. How do we?
I think it's really, really difficult because I think with any of these things, all of it needs to come top down, right? You need to have the ideal situation would be everyone at the top sees the value in all of these types of roles and goes, actually, there's equality between these. And there are still, and I was talking to one of the academics about this recently, there are still things in place that actually perpetuate this idea that academics are more important than PS staff. You know, we've got at our university, academics can go through promotion, PS staff can't. Why, you know, and that perpetuates this idea that there's more importance in this role, and we value this role more than we do this. It's not necessarily there in practice with everyone, but there are still people. So if you have a system that actually supports everything moving down from the top down that goes, both of these are of equal importance, then like Saima was saying, it's the cultural change, you need the social change. We can't necessarily do that as an individual. So, you know, what are the things that we can do for ourselves? One of them is valuing ourselves, speaking out, kind of trying to have that confidence to demonstrate your expertise. One of them is looking for those advocates and finding those advocates around you, and they may not be the ones you're directly in communication with. They may be people in this room on the PRISM network. They may be people at other universities doing similar roles to you, who you can sit and have a conversation with and go, I've been asked to do this. Does that sound right? And someone will go, well, actually, no, that's not right. You shouldn't be doing that, and being able to go have the confidence to say, okay, well, I can now go back to that and say, no, I shouldn't be doing this thing. And because a lot of us do work in these isolated roles, and being able to connect with other people, it's brilliant, like seeing so many people from different institutions and being able to connect across those institutions and just kind of go, are you doing it the same way I am? Like, are we doing this the same way? Are we, do you think I should say something about this, or should I, there's so much value in this wider network. If you haven't got those advocates directly in front of you in your institutions, and there is work to be done there with the institutions, right? But if you haven't got that, where can you look elsewhere to find those people who are your people in your tribe, and the people that can support you in that?
Sorry, can I just add one point there? Following on from what you said about the importance of sponsors, that's one thing that it's a core part of the career development program that we're developing at the University of Manchester, is to have that sponsorship element, because we are usually over-mentored but under-sponsored for most of the underrepresented categories as well, including prisons as well. So we need that opportunity, that equitable opportunity to go ahead. And many of these opportunities are underserved specific areas. And it's basically a sponsorship. It's like handing you a rope, or for you to climb up and finding your way there, really. So that plays a very critical role for a top-down approach, because when you have the senior buy-in, they are looking for you, they're advocating for you, they're basically singing songs about you in spaces where you're not there. So that makes a lot of difference. And I've noticed that many of the people who have reached that particular career progression to a higher grade have had that support, have had that people talking about them in spaces and pushing them forward. And that's very important.
That's what I just have a point. Okay, so just going back to who needs to be involved in the conversation, going back to my point of we celebrated the end of our project last week, our 4-year project on race equity, and our funders were there, so Research England and Office for Students, and it's actually quite refreshing because we concluded at the end of the project that there's still so much work to be done, and we know about the precarity of contracts in our space, and the fact that we invite people in to kind of build up all this goodwill and to develop all these relationships. But what do we do? How do we protect people in our roles that kind of do all of that, and then they're basically going to have to start again in another project or leave the institution and go elsewhere? And it was really refreshing to see this kind of acknowledgement of the fact that we need to have more, as I said earlier, more care for those people that are doing this work, and that actually we need to consider that in the bid. So it really needs to be really, really early on, and that people in our roles need to be included right from the beginning, and not just recruited as part of the team once all of the ideas have been put together. And in most cases, academics are really good at writing those bids, but actually haven't really thought about those people that are doing that work. And so that's something that I'm really quite keen on kind of stressing further, and hopefully something that we're part of the research professionals projects too. So I think that's really important, because I have been trying to do that. So as I mentioned, I've been here at the University of York for 14 years, and sadly my role will come to an end, but it's just because we haven't thought about that. It's been very short term, and we've got redundancies to make. But actually, the university are trying to recruit people like me, because as we just mentioned, we don't have that diversity in roles. I think the stats were 90% are white, but actually because the university haven't thought longer term, they've just thought about that project. There's no kind of bridging gap, and that you will lose people who have then built up that expertise. So I've been working in education for nearly 20 years, but I'm actually now going to use that expertise and go on to do something different, because that hasn't been valued necessarily, hasn't even been considered and thought about. So in terms of who needs to be involved in these conversations? Absolutely the funders, and it needs to be something, not just the performative, what EDI kind of initiatives are you going to include, but what care packages have you thought about, what wellbeing is there that's been factored in, you know, how do we really support these people to do this work? Because the event that I saw last week was basically saying, yes, we've got all of these objectives that we've got to deliver as part of the project, but actually without the care and the consideration and relationship building and all of that invisible labour that we talk about, that actually none of that would have been possible. And that was really appreciated by the people that I've been supporting, but actually not necessarily by the academic staff on my project, sadly. So I'd really love to see funders and doing that and going beyond the performative tokenistic tick box, you know, and say, you know, this is a real, as the person who's written this bid, are you the right person for this role? You know, can we have other stakeholders involved to ask, you know, as we would interview for any job, are you the right person? Have you got the right training? What are you going to be doing? And to really kind of dig deep and go further and go beyond just, you know, that you will have some mentoring initiatives and you'll do, you know, some of these things, you know, really go beyond that. So hopefully the funders were listening, and hopefully for other projects that we've got, that would be something that other funders then follow suit and start considering that further.
Yeah, I was going to ask how can we try and navigate this so that perhaps the early adopters in recognising the importance of these roles start to spread the word, and who are the important people to have in the conversation in terms of organisations, and how can we as a network help those conversations to progress? Where do we need to get our voice heard? How do we access those system level levers that are going to get recognition for these roles and for career pathways in terms of a professionalisation of these roles? I think, Simon, coming back to your point about sponsors, how do you access those sponsors? How do you identify them, never mind access them?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is being proactive as well. For me, when I submitted the grant for the Enhancing Research Culture Award earlier this year, I was the only person from the professional staff, like many of us, who very reluctantly go. We usually work more on others' careers than our career itself. So when I saw this advertisement, I was in a stage where I was in the research project officer role, and I was working on a secondment looking at gender inequality in research awards and application, and this stood out to me. And I said, why not? Why can't I apply for it? Because I do find that lack of representation in professional staff as well. And when I thought quite hard about it, the main thing for me, as I submitted the proposal, to have the steering group. A steering group that follows the project all the way through, and that steering group needed buy-in from the senior leaders. So I took the very unconventional approach. I submitted the culture and the project award, the proposal, and then I scored to the university settings and saw who are the stakeholders I want in this project. I need the EDI academic leads. I want the Vice Chancellor's involvement in it, or at least recommendation to support the proposal. I want the global majority voices in it. So I had to reach out to them separately. So I remember once with the EDI lead, she was going to one of the networking events, and I saw she's going there, fine, I'm going to go there as well. And then I went there over coffee, and I told her I've submitted this proposal, and based on your background, what do you think about this? And she got excited about it. And I said, you know what, it'd be lovely to have you on the steering group. So I did that to several the people, not going to the networking events, dropping them emails and saying, when the award does come through, do you like to be part of it? Again, we had trainings like the higher education anti-racism training that was established, and I wanted that as part of the proposal. So again, I dropped him, the person who had led that line, and I said, I want you on the steering group. Can you help me with this? So it's about reaching out and getting the senior sponsors in. And what that has done is when we do the sponsorship model next year, we have the senior sponsors buy-in already, and that will help me or help the project then get the other senior sponsors to support the research cohort. So I think that has been a bit challenging, and we'll see how that works. But again, it's about looping in the right people, about collaborating, about finding out what has worked past for sponsorship element, We have had inclusive advocacy pilots at the past, which were unsuccessful, looping those persons in, writing emails, getting those buy-ins, explaining to the project what the outcome and the impact is. And I think that's one of the ways really that's sponsorship.
And did you feel like that was a hard sell? Or was the door already slightly open for you?
Well, it was a hard sell in some instances because not everybody believes in your vision and not everybody believes in what you look at. But then at the same time, people are happy to help. People want to give. People enjoy giving. If somebody asks me something, I'll be feeling very happy to help them in some ways. And so similar to that, some doors definitely are closed, and you just have to see what open doors are and look for those opportunities and pick them as say yes to them and keep going. And yeah, that involves a lot of pushing your ideas and sometimes not getting the acknowledgement.
I think it's that statement, isn't it? You miss 100% of the opportunities you don't take, right? And often we'll feel really, really fearful of taking those opportunities because we're right. I say this, what if someone says this? But actually, 90% of the type of roles we have is communication. And it's, being that good communicator, reaching out, taking those opportunities. I think building relationships as well. If you build relationships with people, there's often more of that kind of open door there, maybe the cracks there, and you can go, oh, actually, like if I mentioned, have you thought about it? Or being able to speak to the funders, you build those relationships with those people over the time of the work that you do, and then having that opportunity to go, well, actually, have you, is there a reason why you're not doing it this way? And sometimes I've done it. I've spoken to a couple of people at EPSRC about a very small thing, annual monitoring, something like that. And for this particular thing, I said, well, why is the deadline so tight? Why are you only giving us 2 or 3 weeks to get this data together? Because they saw it as, oh, you just have to go on a system and collect the data and that's fine. I then said to them, well, actually, we have 6 institutions. We are not a legal entity. We can't hold all the data of the 6 institutions. So every time we do it, we have to go to every single institution to get the data. And they went, oh, I never thought about that. Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes it's just that they can't, they're doing their work from their side and they have reasons for doing things the way they do, but they don't know what they don't know until you speak to them and say, oh, actually, have you thought about this? Have you seen it this way? We've done all this work, and it's that communication and that relationship building that really helps to just keep the wheels turning on the beast and keep everyone aware on the side.
Yeah, I imagine you come across the need for this multi-level communication as well in your role.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are so many stakeholders, and I think it's absolutely about communication. I think if you're not transparent, I think as well, I think that's really important, and having that accountability. If something isn't going the way that we planned, obviously the funders will think, oh, we've got this funding, we've got this great idea, but actually, unless we really feed that back in a way that I think also calling in as well. It's not usually a personal thing. It's often a systemic issue, and that we're all trying to tackle some of these systemic issues as part of our projects and some emotionally demanding research, whatever else we're doing. But I think, that accountability is so important. And I think someone mentioned it earlier, but I think it's key for us to, especially with the nature of these short-term projects where you could argue that it's unethical that we start these projects and then, actually we've got to stop, and actually being able to say, well, if we had another 4 years or another, we always say for our project, we felt like we needed 10 years because we're building up all this goodwill and you can't really see the progression. If you have scholarships and ring-fence scholarships, you might see them through to the end of the PhD, but actually what happens after that is where we're trying to support them with their careers and what have you. So it's really important to feed that and to acknowledge that we are at the start of the journey, especially when it's an EDI project for minoritised groups. It's so important to have that and to not be defensive about it and just to say that we're all working together and we're all working to achieve the same goals. So actually, what can we do next? So for me personally, I'm kind of having to take it upon myself to say, the project's wrapping up and we've got the evaluation to do and that's it. But actually, I don't feel ethically I can leave it there. I have this sense of responsibility for this huge project, and I want to feed that back so that we can continue to chip away at the systems that enabling some of these barriers to be placed in the way. So it's, and again, that comes down to us, it's not ever been part of the project, it's just that we'll deliver the evaluation and there you go, and that's it, that's and at the end of it. But for me, I want to continue this and take it beyond, as I say, performative to truly tackling those barriers and those challenges in the way.
Yeah, but it sounds like
It's not easy to do that though, yeah.
yeah, and there are limits to what you can do within your role, and it needs people higher up the chain almost to recognise the value of what you're doing and find a reach opportunity. I'm conscious of time. Do we have online questions?
Yeah, we've got a couple of comments. Do you think that funding bodies have a role to play in encouraging carrot or stick universities to address the key issue of short-term contracts that hampers professional development?
Good question. Yes, I think it's a short answer. Yes, I think universities have a role to play, and they should. And I think, but it's this thing of like, who tells them that? Who's responsible for letting them know? Well, maybe we all are a little bit. And this experience of if each and every one of us kind of went back to our funders and went, oh well, have you thought about this? And actually, what about this? Then you can say you chip away at the system. And I know not all funders are equal as well. Certain funders are kind of getting there and coming towards it. EPSRC, we know they're encouraging PRISMs at co-Is, and things like that. Other funders don't even allow admin support from on the bids.
Mm-hmm.
So there's still an imbalance. But yes, I would say.
I'd be interested to know if the research professionals future projects is going to reach out, or I don't know how they would do this, but reach out to people that have actually left projects, because it'll be those people that actually have got some real insight. So people like myself, I guess, who will be leaving the sector. I'm hoping to still stay within higher education and to work with in the research space. I'm not working in the research space, but actually it'll be those people that have kind of moved on, that have got some real insights, and actually, maybe to fill a case. But I absolutely agree. I think funders, it's their responsibility to do that, and I think unless it's the people that have the money essentially that are saying we've got this and this is your responsibility and we need to see this evidence. And have you thought about in your project management plans, have you built that in? Has that been workloaded? Have you provided the support? Have you considered how if somebody needs some additional support, psychological support, psychological safety, have you thought about all of these things? And as I said, we've started getting those conversations going, so I'm hoping it's a sign of positive change ahead. But I think, as you say, it's everybody's responsibility to do that. The allyship, Marie talked about that. There you go. And I totally agree. It's not the job of the people who are minoritised or people that are doing this work, these prisons. It's everybody's responsibility. And allyship, again, it's not about calling people out and saying, you are to blame. It's about saying collectively we can make this really positive change, and that actually people in positions of power and more senior people, we need that. And allyship, we could I could go into it on about it forever as well. But I think it's not just necessarily about having a placard and say, or putting something on LinkedIn. It's about, could you go back to your team and change policies? Is there an evaluation or a survey or something that we could then send back to our funders? And just show that actually people are saying this on the ground. Mm-hmm. Please listen to us and leave something to change that.
Thank you. Do we have time for a question in the room?
Maybe one last question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's linked to the previous question really, but I think I also agree that the funders should be involved, but the funders tend to rely on metrics to measure success, such as the REF. And internal promotion in academia relies on REF impact and publications. We don't seem to, in our roles, have any metrics for gauging success. I'm just wondering what the panel's thoughts might be on how we might introduce some success criteria to demonstrate our impact of project managers and PRISMs in this and on large research grants.
A really interesting point. Yeah,
So obviously, our colleagues in the technical service job families have managed that with the technician agreement and really working out career progression and training. And I think this is needed for our roles as well, but Katie alluded to this, in Nottingham it's the same. I needed to be regraded. And I can't have a promotion on everything I have done, and there's a reluctance to regrade people, and the work involved in this is crazy. Nobody, many people don't want to touch that. So how can we make career progression fair for everybody? And I do think we need some of the funders for this, because last year at the conference was a lady here to talk from EPSSC, and she said she was actually really disappointed that only a few people were made co-eyes on the ground. Katie is one of them, but we put in, and we had so many academics, they didn't even consider me. We didn't get the grant, but that's something else. And how can we make this that it applies to everybody? It's equal and fair. And yeah, but I think we need to look at what the technicians have done and maybe take some learning from that.
But maybe this framework is a start on the research grant.
Happy to address that point. So I think with the research professional features, we've got 3 Ps that are kind of guiding the work, and one is clarity, one is progression. But yeah, and the other precarity. And when we're thinking about progression, it's definitely looking at precarity as well. How do we avoid precarity? So just a point to plug in as well. So the chair that we had planned for the session today, and thank you Vicky for stepping in, Ash Collins, she is leading a national working group on precarity, not just for PRISMs, looking at precarity generally. But within that working group, she does have funders involved. And she's also the PRISM on a project that's Wellcome Trust funded at Nottingham that is looking at precarity and is considering professional services and PRISMs as well. So I think there is work in this area, and it's about connecting the dots and having opportunities to showcase what's happening, for example, through the National Centre for Research Culture and our activities. But it is being able to point, I think it's what you mentioned in the panel, being able to point at different institutions and saying, they're actually able to do it over there. I wonder how they did it, and could we do it here as well? So with that, I'd like to thank all of our panelists and our chair.